There are moments in life that catch us completely off guard, moments where the ordinary is interrupted by something extraordinary, something that will stay with us forever. This is one of those moments. It began on a routine commercial flight, just another day in the skies. Passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, tucking carry-on bags into the overhead compartments, finding their assigned seats. The soft hum of the engines, the faint scent of coffee drifting from the galley, and the quiet chatter of strangers filled the cabin. Among them was a man, tall, calm, wearing a simple jacket that had seen better days. He wasn't flashy. He didn't draw attention to himself. But if you look closely, you could see the subtle signs, the upright posture, the steady eyes, the quiet strength of someone who had lived through moments most of us can only imagine. He was a veteran. Now, before I tell you exactly what happened on that flight, I want you to pause for a second. Think about the countless stories we never hear. The people we pass in grocery stores, at bus stops, on planes, without ever knowing the sacrifices they've made. This story isn't just about air travel. It's about respect. It's about the moments that remind us that behind every quiet face is a story, and behind every story is a person who deserves to be seen. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever been in a situation where you knew your worth, but the world didn't seem to notice, this story is for you. And if you've ever been on the other side, suddenly realizing you've been in the presence of someone extraordinary, well, you'll feel this one deeply too. But before we dive deeper into this journey, I want to know something from you. Take a second and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I absolutely love seeing people from all over the world come together in the comments. It turns this video into something so much more than a story. It becomes a meeting place. So let me know, are you watching from a busy city? A small town? Somewhere halfway across the globe? Write it down. I'll be reading them. The veteran had just settled into a seat, a window seat, toward the back of the plane. He placed a small bag under the seat in front of him and leaned back, quietly looking out at the tarmac. He wasn't expecting anything unusual. In fact, he was looking forward to a calm, uneventful flight. But then the commotion began. From the front of the cabin, a flight attendant, young, sharply dressed, and clearly a little tense, began making her way toward him. She stopped beside his row and leaned in slightly. Her voice was polite, but her words were unexpected. "Sir," she said, "would you mind moving to another seat?" The veteran turned his head, just enough to meet her eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "It's just we have another passenger who needs to be seated here." Rising curiosity and subtle tension. Now, if you've ever been asked to move seats on a plane, you know that it's not always a simple request. There's an unspoken hierarchy in air travel. People guard their assigned spots like personal territory. Window seat lovers rarely give up their view. Aisle seat fans cling to their legroom. But this wasn't about legroom or a better view. This was something else. The veteran, without showing any sign of irritation, simply nodded. "Of course," he said. He stood, took his bag, and followed her toward another seat. As he walked, a few passengers glanced at him, some curious, some indifferent. None of them knew who he was. None of them knew what was about to unfold. The flight attendant led him toward the middle section of the plane, seating him next to a quiet couple. It wasn't an upgrade. It wasn't even a similar spot. But he didn't complain. If anything, he seemed almost amused, as if he'd learned long ago that life is a way of rearranging things for reasons you can't always see right away. 9 minutes later, though at the time it felt like an eternity, the captain's voice came over the intercom. His tone was calm, but there was a weight in his words. And then the cabin doors opened again. What happened next would leave every passenger in that plane silent. The veteran slowly stood up, his movements deliberate and controlled, almost as if every step was measured. His knees slightly buckled under the weight of time and life's burdens, but his posture remained remarkably dignified. He gently picked up his worn leather duffel bag, the kind that seemed to have traveled to more places than most people could dream of, and looked around as if searching for the right place to relocate. The flight attendant gestured politely toward the rear of the aircraft. People noticed him now, not because of who he was, most still didn't know, but because of how he carried himself. There was a quiet strength in his presence, something unspoken that seemed to draw the eyes of nearby passengers. In a world so obsessed with noise and spectacle, it was almost unsettling to witness such calm dignity. As he moved, a young mother seated nearby leaned slightly toward her teenage son and whispered, "See that man? You can tell he's been through a lot. Watch how he walks. That's a soldier's walk." Her son glanced up from his phone, barely acknowledging her words, but somewhere deep down, a seed of curiosity was planted. When the veteran reached the back, the seat wasn't particularly comfortable. The cushion had seen better days, and the proximity to the lavatory meant a faint chemical scent lingered. But he didn't complain. He simply sat, folded his hands on his lap, and looked out the small oval window. The hum of the engines was soothing, almost like a lullaby for those who could surrender to it. The flight attendant who had requested the move, a young man named Daniel, felt a strange unease in his chest. He hadn't meant any harm. The man sitting in 2A had a special request, and protocol dictated that first-class seats were reserved for those who purchased them or were upgraded through the system. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this passenger than met the eye. Here's where we lean into the deeper human element, the part that makes the audience lean forward in their chairs. In life, we often pass by people without truly seeing them. We're so consumed by our schedules, our priorities, our screens, that we forget every stranger is carrying an untold story. Some of those stories could humble us. Some could inspire us. And some could change the way we see the world entirely. The man in the back of the plane had one of those stories. 10 minutes into the flight, small ripples of conversation began to spread. A man in row 4 had recognized the veteran's face from somewhere. Maybe a local news article years back, or perhaps from a framed photo hanging in a small-town veterans' hall. He leaned over to his seatmate and muttered something. Soon, the murmurs traveled like wildfire. "Isn't that? Wait, the guy from that rescue mission? I think he was decorated by the president." Daniel noticed a shift in atmosphere. Passengers who'd been buried in books or dozing off were now subtly glancing toward the back, some with curiosity, others with awe. Up in the cockpit, Captain Morris received a discreet note from the co-pilot. "Passenger in 26B, retired decorated veteran. Might want to acknowledge." Morris raised an eyebrow. He had flown countless flights, transporting celebrities, politicians, and even royalty, but veterans, they were different. They weren't there for fame. They didn't carry entitlement. They carried history. And so, a silent plan began to form. Before we go any further, if this moment has already made you stop and think about the people you pass by every day, the ones whose stories you may never hear, drop a comment below and tell me about someone in your life who's inspired you. It could be a family member, a friend, or even a stranger you once met. I'd love to read your stories. Asterisk. Back in the cabin, Daniel's unease had shifted to something else. Respect. He approached the veteran cautiously. "Sir, I just wanted to apologize if moving seats was inconvenient. We had a special request from up front." The veteran interrupted with a gentle smile. "No need to apologize, son. I've had far less comfortable rides in my life." Daniel felt the words sink into him. There was no bitterness, no sarcasm, just truth wrapped in humility. To understand why this moment mattered, we have to rewind decades. The veteran, whose name was Thomas "Tom" Everett, had served in multiple overseas deployments. He wasn't the loud type. He didn't tell war stories at bars or parade his medals around. But those who had served with him spoke of a man who stayed calm under fire, who made decisions that saved lives, and who never left anyone behind. There was one mission in particular, deep in hostile territory, where Tom's quick thinking had not only saved his unit, but also led to the rescue of 2 civilians. That event had earned him one of the nation's highest military honors. But Tom rarely spoke of it. Why? Because in his mind, heroism wasn't about being recognized. It was about doing what needed to be done, no matter the cost. As the plane cruised through the clouds, passengers began quietly looking up his name on their phones. Screens lit up with old headlines, grainy photos, and news clips. And slowly, the cabin's energy shifted from routine travel to silent reverence. In seat 2A, the man who had requested Tom's original seat, something unexpected stirred. He had no idea who the veteran was when he'd made the request. Now, reading the articles on his phone, he felt a mix of embarrassment and respect. The plush seat, the complimentary champagne, none of it seemed as valuable anymore. 9 minutes after Tom had been moved, the cockpit door opened. The cabin went quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with anticipation. Captain Morris stepped out, his crisp uniform impeccable, his cap tucked under one arm. Without hesitation, he walked down the aisle toward the rear of the aircraft. Every step seemed deliberate. Passengers instinctively leaned back to give him space, as though something important was unfolding before their eyes. When he reached Tom's row, the captain paused, squared his shoulders, and gave a sharp, respectful salute. "Mr. Everett," he said in a voice that carried through the cabin, "on behalf of the crew, our airline, and every passenger here, I want to thank you for your service." For a moment, it was as if time froze. The hum of the engines, the clink of coffee cups, even the restless shifting of passengers, all of it faded into a respectful stillness. This was not the end of the gesture. In fact, it was only the beginning of something that would leave the entire plane talking long after they landed. The cabin had fallen into a respectful hush after the pilot's salute. Even the usual hum of idle chatter seemed to fade, as if the entire aircraft understood the magnitude of what had just happened. Yet, what unfolded next would not only bring closure to the moment, but would also leave every passenger on board with a story they'd never forget. The veteran, visibly moved, nodded in acknowledgement. His hands, calloused from decades past, trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming tide of memories the pilot's gesture had brought back. The flight attendant who had initially asked him to move was now standing a few rows away, her face showing a blend of respect and a trace of guilt. She hadn't done anything wrong. Policy is policy. But now she understood that sometimes moments outweigh rules. The pilot remained at the front of the cabin, speaking in a voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Pilot, ladies and gentlemen, I don't often do this, but today we're sharing this flight with someone whose service helped make it possible for all of us to be here, free, safe, and together. This man is a veteran who dedicated years of his life so that people he'd never meet could live without fear. On behalf of the crew and as a fellow serviceman, I want to say thank you." A ripple of applause swept through the cabin, slow at first, then building until it became a wave of gratitude. Some passengers stood, others wiped away tears. One young boy, sitting with his mother near the middle of the plane, held up his hand in a small, shy salute. The veteran's eyes glistened as he returned the gesture. That single exchange, a boy barely old enough to understand war, and a man who had lived through its harshest realities, bridged generations in a way no speech could. The narrator's voice could now shift to an intimate tone, speaking directly to the viewer. Moments like these remind us that honor isn't just a medal or a uniform. It's the quiet resilience of those who gave, expecting nothing in return. It's the recognition that freedom has a cost, paid in years, in sacrifice, and sometimes in lives. And here's the truth. We pass people like this every day without even realizing it. From there, the script would lean into relatability, reminding the audience that heroes don't always look like they do in movies. They sit beside us in airports. They stand behind us in coffee shop lines. They live quietly, carrying stories most will never hear. And right now, I want to know, if you were on that flight, what would you have said to this man? Would you have shared a thank you? A handshake? Tell me in the comments, because reading your words might inspire someone else to speak up when they meet their own unsung hero.